Hi, everyone, and welcome to our EdTech Team Online Hangout on Air for our project-based learning course. I'm Tracy Purdy, and today we have a special guest with us to share. I'm going to introduce him in just a second, but as you guys are all starting to join, I want to remind you that you should tweet out your thinking, your questions, anything that you're thinking about during this Hangout on Air using the EdTech Team Online hashtag, and we can answer those questions. You can also use the chat in YouTube and ask your questions right there. Dominique is here, and she's going to be monitoring the back channel, and she'll jump in and ask Micah some questions if you guys have some questions. So we're really excited to be starting this unit and start thinking about project-based learning. And our guest today is Micah Shippee. Micah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Micah Shippee. I am finishing year number 18, teaching 7th grade social studies. I've also coached a lot and found the tangible applications a coach receives are things I chase after in my classroom. I have a PhD in instructional design, development, and evaluation, which is a mouthful. Basically, it means I love learning how to explore emergent technology and its instruction, how to be leveraging it for instructional purposes. So, which means I embrace failure and trying new things, and my students have the opportunity to see an adult be resilient, exercise some rigor, and sometimes fail right in front of them.
That's awesome. Now, Micah, did you tell, I always think it's interesting for people to know where you're at in the world.
Yeah, so I'm in Liverpool, which is a suburb of Syracuse, New York, which means I get awesome snow days. I get 4 distinct seasons, and I get July and August off.
Which is awesome. Fantastic. Good. So Micah's still in school for the rest of this week as well, which I know some of the people in our cohort are still finishing up their last few days of school as well. So Micah, you're here to share, and you're going to tell us a little bit about project-based learning. You're going to incorporate in the SAMR model, and even Micah's known to me as someone who is very passionate and an expert about geo. So we'll get to hear a little bit about that as well. I will share Micah's resources, the link to it, so you can all have it if you guys go on to the EdTech Team Online hashtag on Twitter.
Cool. So I've done a project-based learning in many different ways in my classroom. One of the ways I started early in my career was through a formalized process called National History Day. National History Day provides students with a kind of a big idea, like communication in history or taking a stand in history. And then it's up to the teacher and the student to come up with content-based applications which illustrate their understanding of the theme. The student choice in content selection as well as in delivery medium, I found really increased motivation with students. So it's directly related to project-based learning, where you have the ability to sometimes guide students towards a certain deliverable, in my case, sometimes geo, but also allow them choice. So in my experience in the past, I had students writing research papers, producing project boards, making websites, producing documentaries, and then bringing them before a judge, an adult expert, and who talked to them about the creation process as well as the content deliverable. So that's really where my personal training in project-based learning came from. I love choice for students, but I also love seeing them struggle a little bit with new technology and how it can be applied to achieve goals. But I can't help but reflect back on myself as a teacher and in how I deliver projects to my students. It's very iterative. My projects I would do with students in that case would be, a one-shot deal. They'd be out the door, and who knows if the next teacher after me continue with that. But I viewed it as an opportunity to kind of hone my own skills and to help me with my students and what I deliver to them as expectations on different projects that we do. I would like to share a screen with you. I'll pop that up here, screen share. There it is. All right. So I'm looking here at the SAMR model. The SAMR model has been around for a while now. It's a really tangible way of thinking about approaching instruction. It could be looked as instructional workflow, but you can also really think about this as, here's a project I do with my students year 1. What can I do with it year 2? What can I do year 3? And how can I continue to iterate and increase the technology adoption for this project? So for example, one project that I'll focus on today, and I'll use it for Geo as well as a transition, is about a half mile from my school is a cemetery. And in that cemetery are buried folks who fought in the American Revolution and the Civil War and the War of 1812, all content areas that fit my 7th grade New York State curriculum. So several years ago, I decided I would walk students down the road and give them a little tour and introduce them to how our community ancestors contribute to the textbook content. That was my first year. My second year, I decided, if you think of the SAMR model as a form of substitution, I decided to think about how can I help students to understand this in a better way and make more meaning. So I had them sketch gravestones by hand. I had them use their social studies textbook and online resources to create a biographical sketch of things that would have happened while that person was alive. Each student had one portion of the cemetery or one grave site to document, and it contributed to a larger body. I then took that content and actually talked to the students about how do we apply this to a geo tool. So for geo tools, what we did is we took a Google My Map. So I'll flash up a Google My Map here. My Map is easily my favorite Google tool. And our Google My Map, oh no, I've lost it. Hang on one second. Nothing bad ever happens when you do things live, does it? You know what it is I have about 10 accounts, and I'm going to flash over to this one. Excuse me one quick second. I'll take off the screen share so you can all watch me struggle live.
It's good for all of us.
It's good for, yeah, why not, right? Okay, so here we go with a screen share. Nice. Okay, here we go. So I had them walk again to the cemetery, and I was like, okay, now that we, in the past, I'm thinking in my teacher mind, we have done this handwritten version. How can we help? How can I, or how might I help my students contribute to a global body of information? So my students and I continue with the same process, but we substituted the paper for the digital. So here with the Google My Maps, you have the ability to share. So you'll see I'll click share here. You have the ability to share your map with anyone, not only to view, but also to annotate. So like a Google Doc that can be collaboratively added to, a My Map, you can do the exact same thing. So I can walk over here, and instead of it just being viewable on the internet, I can make this My Map editable by anyone in the world. Now I teach 12-year-olds. So when I give 12-year-olds access to edit something live, there's potential they're going to make a mistake on somebody else's map as well as their own. So I did this in their class setting. We had kind of a Genius bar set up where they're helping each other. And after they left, I went back into the map and changed it simply to view. So that way our content was done, pretty much locked in so that they wouldn't harm somebody else's content. The students dropped pins approximately where they thought the gravestone was, and we added images. Now the images we added have been removed from the students because it was based on their Google Drive account. They added simple content about when someone was born and died. They also added much more textual content about what happened while that person was alive and who they were. The kids were really excited about this as an opportunity to contribute to a global body of knowledge and to allow people around the world to see what was going on in our little community. It was also a really cool way to increase school-to-home communication, to give parents a window into our classroom, because when we're authoring on a My Map, we're actually creating a website. And sometimes it's hard to think that way, but whenever we're using anything in the G Suite or the Google Geo tools, it's all live on the internet, and when we create with it, we're actually creating websites. So in this case, My Maps was a super simple website. I got the students pretty excited because I taught them about how we can take this data, this geo data, and actually release it in a, let me pull it up for you here. we can actually release it in augmented reality, which got them pretty excited because augmented reality is magical. And we use a program called Wikitude. So let's go ahead and type in Liverpool Cemetery. Thought I had every single tab open that I needed. Apparently not. Yeah, this is not working. All right, so I'm going to close that. So I'll post that in the slide deck for you to check out later on. But there is a visual showing how you take this data and it was applied to an augmented reality world.
What was that tool that you said you used again?
I used a tool called Wikitude, which at the time was offering a free way of taking KML data. I'll continue here on my MyMap. I can show you. My maps have a drop down, and it says export KML. KML is a language from a company that Google bought called Keyhole. And Keyhole markup language is this universal tool for geo that Google retained. So if we author something in My Maps, we can actually export it as a KML and then import it into Google Earth. Am I getting too geeky, or are we okay with this?
No, that's pretty awesome. Somebody was asking, so it is Wikitude. Oh, I see it, wikitude.com.
Yes.
I'll post
the reason I didn't add Wikitude to that is because when you're dealing with emergent technology, remember, it's an iterative process. And you can't rely on what I did last year. And this Wikitude process lasted for 18 months for free, and then this fall it was shut off. So that way of using augmented reality no longer exists. So for me, instead of it being a downer, it's an opportunity for what's next. So I'm going to continue to show you what's next. Is that cool?
Yes.
All right. You picking up what I'm laying down okay?
Yes.
All right, good. So the Liverpool Cemetery project, again, served as this kind of catalyst for me to keep bringing in kind of cool products for the students to try out as a way to, again, help them showcase our little community in upstate New York. So what we did next from there is we left My Maps and we started to look at building a website and using some of the geo tools, which I'll explain to you on a website. So let me adjust my screen share here. I'm back and I'm gone again. There we go. All right, cool. So here's our Liverpool Cemetery project. We use the new Google Sites, which again allows for collaboration. I'm a huge fan of large-scale collaboration. I think there's power in demonstrating to students the ability for them all to contribute to one knowledge base. As a researcher, I 12 years ago would have been pretty turned off if you had spoken to me about Wikipedia as a research source. But what we found with Wikipedia is it's becoming socially vetted. So many people are using it that we're not allowing information to be incorrect on it. Or we've all agreed on the wrong thing. Either one's quite possible. So with that mindset, we're living in a global knowledge-based world where students, it's part of their skill set is to learn what it's like to contribute and to be relied upon. So for our cemetery project, each student, again, was given a grave site to use. And they took the information from the grave site, and we took on an old book, which is out of publication, and we did some transcription. So there was a lesson built into that about copyright and how if a book is out of print, we're going to cite that book, but we can use transcription. And students were given different jobs. So in this case, it was a Liverpool Cemetery walking tour, actually written by a former teacher. This is the homepage of it. And on the homepage, students transcribed that text, and they also took photographs as being the homepage. They took photographs about the cemetery and some more general tombstone sites. I taught them about embedding a Google slide deck. So we made a Google slide deck, and we used a publish to the web code. I can show you right here. When you build a Google slide deck, you can go File, Publish to the web, and you can decide how you're going to publish it. I used the embed feature, and then I made it advanced slides every 3 seconds. So if you wanted to allow for a moving slideshow, Google Slides is a great way to do that. Make a couple of slides, change them every 3 seconds, and you can bring that right into Google Sites. One of my slides in my ridiculously long slide deck that I've shared, there's a series of them that demonstrate how to insert into Google Sites. So for my students, we wanted to do a little bit more as well. Like here, a student did one on a man named Nathan Whiting, and Nathan Whiting's tombstone. Students took these photographs and we embedded them. But I also said, hey, let's nerd this up a little bit and let's go to Google Maps, find the 360 data, and embed a 360 right in Google Sites. So the new Google Sites really does give you a lot of ability to do some pretty cool stuff. Again, this Google site that I'm sharing with you was shared with all of my students to edit together. We had a Genius Bar type atmosphere where they're helping each other, and I wandered around and helped them to bring in their content to this site. Again, this is also on my slide deck how to do this, but basically we go to a place like maps.google.com. I recognize that's confusing. Maps.google.com is not the same thing as iMaps. Google's kind of messing with us by changing that, but maps.google.com is a little different in that it gives us satellite data. So for example, if I want to take satellite data from the park down the road from my house, I click on the Pegman, and he reveals all the blue lines that are Street View. If it's a line, it's usually done by the Google car. So I'll click on this one, and I see that as I pan around, in the left-hand side, it says Google Inc. So that means Google made this 360 photo. If I go back to it and click the Pegman, I'm looking for dots. So here's some circles. These spheres, those are usually done by random people. So if I click on one of those and I pan around, I'm probably not going to see Google Inc. In fact, I'm seeing a lady named Lena Wallace. So Lena decided to post this really cool picture of a river down the road from my community. As soon as it goes on to Google Maps, it's also, by the way, viewable similarly on Google Earth. It means it's public information, but Lena, in this case, who I've never met, we'll have to meet, she seems nice. Lena has full editing access to this and the ability to delete this at any time. I want to take Lena's and add it to a site. So I can click on these three dots in the corner and share or embed. And this is what my students did with the cemetery grave sites. We clicked embed a map, and we tried to decide how do we want it. Let's say we wanted our orientation to be facing something scenic like down the river. My screen's a little small here, excuse me. There we go. This map is built for me. And let me pull this up. I can grab the URL and embed. Resolution's a little off. Let's try that again. Share or embed. Embed a map. And then here's the share link up here. So I'm just going to click on this, copy it, and then I go into Google Sites and simply embed it. And Google Sites has an embed code feature. Is this making sense okay? So it's basically
that's awesome.
So
great tips.
Yeah, so side by side, we've got a 360 image and we've got a slide deck and some transcribed information. For the project, that's basically the pattern we followed. I found when I was doing this, this is the first time I did this with my students, setting up a structure where they're going to transcribe, then they're going to lay out the images and the 360s. That kind of helped me to be able to help them and them to help, more importantly, each other. Back on the home page, I wanted to try something new that Google released literally 1 week before this project, and that's Google's Tour Creator. So here's Tour Creator, which I also embedded. And Tour Creator allows you to do some scenes. So in this case, I'm going to go to scene 2, and you'll see the scene is auto-rotating. And we're also getting these little eyes that are appearing. And so this eye that's appearing, I can click on it, and it reveals where these grave sites are. it's something I'm kind of playing with, wanted to see how it looked. I thought it was kind of cool for students to be able to see where their grave sites are in a little bit different way. Tour Creator presently doesn't have a collaboration feature on it. I'm really hoping that we see one pretty soon.
Awesome. Micah, can I jump in?
Yes.
And so with setting up this project, did you set up like one driving question for your students for finding out about the history of the people in the town, or?
Yeah, so I really let my social studies objectives for New York State talk about our community and our community's role in history education. So they you know, each schools that adopt Common Core, for example, they still have their own state or local overlay to think about how they fit. So in this case, it was, how do our grave sites, you know, who are these people? Who is the regular man in the Civil War? Who's the regular man in the American Revolution? And how can we take the regular man or woman and share them with the community and show the world how our community contributed to, in this case, American history?
Awesome.
So yeah, so that's kind of where that focus came from with the students.
Perfect.
That answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, a lot of these tools, I'm hoping that the viewers are thinking about how their own curriculum might be a match for each of these tools.
Yes.
People are content area experts, so I'm going to walk through a bunch of tools, but you know, if you're a foreign language teacher, you might think, hey, 360 photos and have students tell me what it is in a different language is the way to go.
We have people already on Twitter saying that you've given them great ideas for using 360 data in their Google sites, to venture out near their school to explore a little bit more. So definitely giving them ideas.
Yeah, just a little pro tip about that. If you use Google Street View, let me double check. I believe I have a slide on that. Google Street View allows you to take your own 360 photos. So in the slide deck that I've shared with everybody, let me pull this up here. Okay, so Google Street View is a free app that allows you to take 360 pictures. So if you wanted your students to take 360 photos, they can be uploaded to Google Earth. Now that makes some of us cringe, and I'll address that in a moment. The 360 spheres can be done for free. Here's one that one of my buddies, Molly, took of me in Canada. And you'll notice that my image is a little bit ghosted here. That's because Molly was using the app, and when you use the app, that person needs to stand still. And if you've learned anything from me right now, it's that I don't hold still very well. So Molly had a hard time getting me in the frame because I kept moving about. Now there are 360 cameras like the 360 Theta, which will take an instant 360 photo. That's the one that me and a lot of my colleagues in Geo like to use. It's a pretty good standard, the Theta. Again, that's available in the slide deck I shared with you. The pro tip that I would share regarding that is that when students are using 360 photos and they're adding them to Google Earth, we have to be extra cautious about several things. One is faces of children under the age of 18. We often don't want to be putting those on the internet. So in Street View, you also have the ability in my directions to blur faces. So you can take a photo and blur it. It will nicely just kind of wash out the facial features. You can do that with license plates and addresses as well. But I think perhaps the greatest pro tip, if I was to do this with my students to have them capture 360s, would be to create a dummy account or log into my account and then distribute devices so that I have ownership over the photos. So if a student takes an inappropriate photo, even if it's innocent, I need to have the ability to delete that photo and get it off the internet. The owner of those Street View photos has the ability to do that. But I wouldn't want a student to, you know, of course, perhaps innocently take a photo and then forget their password, and I can't get that picture down very easily. So I think it would be best to create your own accounts and have students do it in that way.
Yes, awesome. Can I interject one of the questions, two different questions that have come up?
Mm-hmm.
So one of them was, in your opinion, do you feel that project-based learning needs to be based on student choice, or can there be an idea that is more teacher driven?
Needs is a tough word. Should it be based on student choice? Yes. And the reason for it, that it should be based on student choice, and I'm not going to be, on my soapbox. I don't always offer student choice on everything that I do, but there is an unbelievable amount of research on how choice is directly associated with motivation. So when students have the ability to choose, it's well documented, it increases motivation. Even if they're not super excited about 4 choices, if they have the ability to pick one, it's a good thing. With those choices, the difficulty for teachers is that we don't always have a great deal of confidence in every single tool that we're offering students the ability to use. That's kind of tough because we do want to meet with students individually. We want to coach students. We want to check their progress and talk to them about how it's going. And if we focus on content, that's great. We can also use it as an opportunity to help students use tools like the G Suite Trainer extension and teach themselves, if they're using G Suite, where they have the Google icon in the corner, and take their own tutorials. I mean, we live in a YouTube world where if I got to fix my refrigerator, I go on YouTube and I can almost find the exact same one and figure out how to fix it. Yeah. So if I'm doing that at home with my own home life, why aren't I doing that in my classroom with G Suite tools? So instead of thinking of myself as the sage on the stage that needs to know everything about everything my students are doing, I need to start reframing my thinking as a guide on the side, someone who's going to show students how to find help and hopefully be able to provide some of that help, but admit to them freely that I don't know it all, and they can watch me Google the answers right in front of them for how to use a tool. I'm not ashamed to do that. It took me a few years to get to that point in my career, but when I saw the students recognize that Micah Shippee doesn't know everything, but he's going to figure it out, I like that. And I like watching them do it. It gets a little rough for a history teacher when I throw a fact out there and I go, I think this is the case. And they're like, Dr. Shippee, let me Google that for you. I'm like, you know what? Go ahead. Let me know if I'm close.
That's good. We have another question about when your students are involved in a project like this, what does your check-in or your feedback throughout the project-based learning assignment look like?
It's twofold. One way has nothing to do with me. I love the wiki nature. Think of a wiki as we knowledge, right? I like the we knowledge nature where it's like if you're not prepared for class, your classmates are going to be bummed out. That is an awesome form of check-in when they're working with a large group and then we're all trying to build this website and one student hasn't done their work. I find that students who aren't as concerned about a letter or number grade are concerned about social commodity. They're concerned about their peers not being happy with them for not doing their work. That's one form of check-in. The other is to chunk it and to really look at like, how big is this project? Part 1 might be transcription in the case of the cemetery. So for part 1, I started it in class and said, look, I'll see you in 2 days. Your transcription's got to be done. For part 2, look, we're going to go take pictures and put them into Google Drive. You've got to know how to share a Google Drive with your partners. You got to know how to take a picture with your iPad. You got to have that done before we get to class. And if it's not done, you need to see me. This particular project led to a great problem in that one of the sites that I assigned, the curators of the cemetery removed the gravestone and it wasn't there. So the kids were really kind of freaking out on me. And I said, well, it's okay. You'll just fail this part of the project, and they were higher achieving students. So that I helped skew them away from a mini meltdown because they knew me at this point. And it put some pressure on me to help provide them with resources through the Geo 360 photospheres. So little check-ins along the way instead of waiting till the end of the project are really good. Again, peer collaboration and peer responsibility, I'm a huge fan of.
That's awesome. And that does go with another question coming in. There are students who struggle with choice. They like to be told exactly what to do every step of the way. And any tips for working with students who like to be told what to do?
Yeah, so my highest achieving students have the most trouble with that exact question. So my student who gets 100 on all my tests and quizzes, aces every single homework assignment. When I say, what do you want to do? They don't know. That bothers me. And it bothers me so much that I keep doing that stuff. And it's not to mess with them. Although in middle school, the awkwardness is a lot of fun. It's not to mess with them. The point is they have to learn. If you're going to create and produce in a constantly changing world, you have to make decisions. They have to make decisions. So I talk to them about, if it's slides, docs, or maps, which one do you like? Which one do you like to create it? When your other classes assign something, which one do you think you excel at? And if you'd like to continue that, go ahead. But I also tell them, look, you've seen me take risks live and you've seen me fail. Are you willing to try that? Give it a shot. You got nothing to lose. I'm also cautious with students like that about having conversations regarding grades and say, look, I might be grading content. I'm not grading skills. And when we're working with G Suite products, a lot of that is skills. The best way to learn a skill, as much as no one wants to admit it, is through failure. It's like riding a bike. You're going to fall and skin your knees open, then you get back on the bike. So when I grade it, I'm going to grade content. When I was doing the large scale history project, I was grading your number of resources, the quality of your resources, and some documents that describe the process. The end product was not the hugest part of the grade. And in the case of emergent technology, where I myself don't know every single thing that's going to happen, that reduces the amount of the grade weight on that by far, because it's just not fair to the students nor me.
Yeah, no, that's definitely great feedback. It is definitely something that they need to learn. And if they can start practicing that now in middle school and elementary school, high school, then they'll be much more successful on their own. Micah, I'm wondering, okay, so one more question came in about how you hold students accountable, how to convince your administrators that you are holding students accountable in a project-based learning assignment or environment.
Well, I mean, when we're curriculum designers, you might even say we're experienced designers. And our curriculum and in our experience, we have objectives that start those. So when I do a project where it's students are doing research on a person who took a stand in history, well, the parameters of the project are the content that I teach. So it's not anyone in all history. And then the parameters of the project also need to be broken down into some kind of deliverables that are related to my content. So what does it mean to take a stand in history? What media or medium did that student use to take a stand? Cause and effect. Those are all generalizable topics related to social studies that are not hard to convince someone what I'm doing. Really for me, the difficulty has been about using resources outside my classroom, about using the school gym or using the school cafeteria as a teachable space for a social studies classroom. I'm fortunate right now to have an administrator who is totally on board with the cemetery project, and he thinks it's great that we leave the building and go and do that. But I haven't always had that, and nor do all of us. Some of us feel a bit confined to four walls. That tends to be the flexible teaching space tends to be the larger battle. But as teaching experts, it's our job to set up a project-based learning initiative that's in alignment with our curriculum. If I was doing something where I wanted to teach students how to use a 3D printer and they were going to 3D print Star Wars characters, I think it'd be great, but it doesn't really fit American history. If I wanted them to do a 3D printer, I might we're going to make a mini American history museum. And in our American mini history museum, we need to find people from American history that we can print busts of to place.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a good spin on that for sure. And I think it goes back to your driving question for sure as well, that really is built from your curriculum. And then you're letting them, instead of having one set outcome, that is the only way that they can show you that they've learned that it's a little bit more flexible, that they are given some freedom to choose how they'd like to show that they learned that concept.
I also think it's really important as perhaps a teacher who's about to engage in PBL perhaps for the first time, it's really important to understand you don't necessarily need to throw away everything you do and everything you've done. It's okay to look at a portion of your curriculum. Maybe it's the one you're the most comfortable with, and take that portion of the curriculum and start to look at that in a PBL way. And then you're going to find that when you see the enthusiasm of students trying this new teaching strategy or using emergent technology, you're going to want to replicate that, because that's why we teach. It's for the light bulb moments. So start small, understanding that next year is going to be better than the first year, and break into it.
That's awesome. That's good advice that we should probably end on. Mike, is there anything else that you want to share with teachers? Or I know we didn't even let you get through all of your resources that you had to share with everybody, but they have that link that they can go and check them out.
Yeah, I have a lot of resources. I intended just to share them as a catalog of things to check out later on. Please feel free to reach out on Twitter or email. My email is just my first and last name @gmail. I love to know what people are doing. If there's some little light bulb that went off based on something we covered, I would love to hear about it. Please share. In the near future, I'll be at ISTE if you want to connect. So it'd be great.
That's awesome. There are a few more questions on the EdTech Team Online hashtag and even the YouTube feed. So I can send those your way, and then we can get those questions answered for people. We also had a request. I don't know if you'd be willing to stay on for just a minute to show how you can export the KML,
sure.
I think.
Sure.
So, but I do want to just say, for people who are joining us and they don't care to see that piece, thank you so much for joining us. Dig into those resources on PBL. Know that Micah is a resource for you guys at Micah Shippee on Twitter. Reach out to him with questions. Search that PBL hashtag as well, because there are a lot of resources there. And we're just so glad that you joined us today, either whether it was live or a little bit later. So thanks a ton.
Cool.
Yeah, so do you want to show, there are a couple of people that are going to stay on, and they would love to see how you export the KML.
Yeah, it's
from the beginning.
Pretty nerdy. People ready for that?
I think so.
All right. Let me adjust my screen a little bit so that I can help more efficiently. Are you able to see my whole screen okay?
Yes. Let's see here. Hold on. Yep, we can see the Hangout on the side of it as well.
Perfect. So this is us looking at us, looking at us, looking at us. All right. Yeah. So the way it works is My Maps is really a clutch creation tool. You can see I've done this a couple of times. So My Maps is a great place to create files. Now, the files that you create, My Maps can come in a couple different forms. I use an online social studies atlas that my students create live. But I can simply grab a marker, drop a pin, call it point 1, and save it. I can change the color of the pin. I can also change the icon of the pin, right? So that's pretty standard stuff. People in the googly world have seen a few times. I also have the ability, so let's just drop 2 there. I have the ability to draw a polygon. Now, polygons are what I've been using with my students quite a bit. A polygon is a line or a shape. So if I click here, and then I'm going to go click and move, click and move. And let's say I'm doing the Louisiana Purchase, which is kind of sort of like this. I am going fast. I know that. I have a couple of YouTube videos out there about how to do this a little bit more slow. I'm going to cut Tracy right off across the middle of Minnesota there. All right, so polygon 3, I can call it, let's say, Louisiana Purchase. I might even spell it right on the first try. And then I'm going to add an image. There's a purpose. There's a reason I'm doing all of this for you. An image of Louisiana using a Google search. Okay, and I can do about 25 of these. The image grab doesn't look like it. Try a different one. Select. Okay, there it is. So this can be 25 different pictures. So this is what I initially did with my students the first time we did the project. It can turn into a slideshow that you click. You'll have a button here to click. Now, a KML file is being created this whole time. So I'm going to go up to, first of all, create a name. I'll call it Micah's, spell my name right. And then I'm going to grab the 3 lines. The 3 lines right here, the 3 dots, allow me to export a KML. A KMZ is a zipped or smaller version. So I'm going to click Export to KML, and I'll choose Export the whole thing. For my students, when I do this in class, if they miss a day and we did this, for a copy of their notes, they go to My Map, and they actually export the particular layer that we're working with. So it's pretty cool for regular Atlas geography work. So I'm going to click download. The KML file goes down here, and it has the same name, Micah's map. Okay. In places like Google Earth, which is now completely online over the last year, they migrated the whole thing. I have the ability to bring in a KML file onto the Earth. So as it loads here, I'm going to double check. Okay, cool. So I've got Pegman in the corner. He's my Street View guy. Notice if we zoom in on my Earth, there's nothing here, right? It's visually super appealing, this new Google Earth. I really like it. I'm going to go to the settings. Now, in any Google product, 3 lines and 3 dots mean this is where you go for your menu, right? So I'm going to click on the 3 lines and go to settings. Now, those of you doing this for the first time, you do need to do this particular step once. At the bottom of settings is this right here, enable KML. That is the file that we're working with. You have to enable it and turn it blue. That means you can now bring files in. So you'll simply click Save. Then I'm going to go to my Places, which is like a bookmark, and click Import KML file. That will not appear unless you first enable it in the settings. So now I click Import. I'll click Open File. If you're like me and your files are getting super wonky and you can't find anything, then I highly suggest on whatever device you're using, PC, Mac, Chromebook, etc., use features like just type in KML and let it find it for you instead of worrying about it, because that's very difficult to navigate for that. So Micah's KML file, you'll see it's the one I just did at 540. I'll click Open. And there you can see it's all been added to Google Earth. So if I hit Save, I can delete that there. And there it is. So this is cool for a couple of things. It's showing us that sometimes the custom pins aren't working with their nice, like this was the hiker guy, but the pin is still there, and this pin is still here. One of these, I think it's, nope, not that one. This one of Louisiana, I have the map, the picture I imported there. So it provides you with the flat tool of my map with a way of viewing it in a more three-dimensional, cleaner looking Google Earth, which is good if you're, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, now they shared that link, or how would they share that with other people?
So if you wanted to share your KML file, what I've done is I take this file and I put it in Google Classroom. So I put the KML file in Google Classroom, and I tell my 12-year-old students, go into Google Classroom and import this file. Now, full transparency, I do that with my maps all the time. With Google Earth, if they're under the age of 13, Google Earth is turned off in the admin console because Google Earth is classified similarly to YouTube. So your admin console, your district IT department will have to, you'll have to have an overly pleasant conversation, said no one ever, about unblocking and opening. If you have high school students, that tends to be something that they do a little bit more often, a little bit cleaner. I've worked with schools that send a letter home about, hey, we're going to open this up, just letting you know, and that usually goes pretty well.
Awesome. Well, very cool. That's very fun to see that in action, and people can learn how to do that. I bet we'll have quite a few people using some geo tools for their project-based learning units. So
that's my life goal.
Micah, yeah. Micah, thank you so much for joining us, and all the viewers out there, thank you for joining us, and keep tweeting out using the EdTech Team Online hashtag.
Cool. Thanks.
Bye. See if I can